Hey guys, thanks for joining us here on our live stream at Salty Ginger Talk. Really appreciate you coming in tonight. Had a little scheduling snafu tonight, and so it's just going to be me for the live stream, but that's just fine. We've got plenty of stuff to cover. Always look forward to hearing from the audience and any listeners. You can put something in the comments. Our producer will get those comments to me. If there's a topic you want to discuss, or a question or a comment that you want to make or get a reaction to from the live stream, by all means, throw it in the comments there on YouTube, because we're live streaming on YouTube here, and we can take care of that. So what I wanted to do tonight was spend a little bit of time on this whole immigration conversation and what I call a debacle in our country. So we need to learn. It's a good example of removing emotion from things and looking at things from a factual lens. And I think if you do that, you will recognize that there are very valid points or arguments on both the side of people supporting very aggressive immigration deportation policy, and those who are protesting and or not happy about the approach that is being taken to execute these deportations. So I wanted to spend some time talking about those things logically and unemotionally, not looking to get in a big argument with people, not looking for name calling, not looking for any of those things. I'm looking for rational adults who want to participate in a rational discussion around this topic. So yeah, that's it. So let's just jump into it from there. So as it relates to immigration, like, the first point that I think is important for all of us to agree on is that we need borders around our country. And if you are in the camp of open borders or no borders, and by the way, I think that group is very, very small. I think we've got have given an outsized voice to a very, very small group of people who think that way. But it's still worth talking about because it does seem to get thrown around a lot. And it's easy to look at the lack of enforcement that happened in the previous administrations and say, hey, we've had an open border policy for a while. It's not true. But we've certainly been very derelict in our responsibility of enforcing the borders that are there. So the easiest way that I can think of to get people to understand this is if you don't leave your door to your house wide open and let people just come and go as they please, then you have to support a border for the country. And there's both a safety and an economic reason that countries have borders, right? And the safety one's pretty straightforward. We want to control who's in the country and who's not. And I totally understand the argument that, yeah, there's some shitty people in the United States who are U.S. citizens who we just don't have to deal with because by law, they're U.S. citizens. That same thing can be said in any country. And so to me, that's not, a great argument against deportations. Like, why don't we get rid of the bad people? Well, they're U.S. citizens. That's the way the law works. And we should deal with those bad people. But one of the ways to deal with them is not by deporting them to another country, because they're from our country, whether we like it or not. That's just the case. But we certainly can control importing or allowing others who are bad actors or who are not decent members of society or who don't want to be decent members of society into our country. Drug traffickers, human traffickers, people that commit felonies, assaults, rapes, armed robberies, domestic violence, all of those things are reasons for us to enforce our borders. And then there's the economics of it. So just go back to your house example. If you just had your door, let's just say you took your front door off the hinges, because that's what an open border would essentially be. Anyone in your neighborhood could come wandering into your house anytime, day or night. They could go into your fridge. They could take food. They could turn the heat up to 80 degrees because they were cold. They could turn it down to 60 degrees in the summer. when they were hot, and you would be stuck footing the bill for that. Mind you, these guests in your house are not contributing financially to your house at all, largely because there's no way for them to do so. And so, from an economic perspective, we absolutely have to control how immigration happens in our country. So, if you've got a different outlook or a different response or a different solution for some of those problems that I just brought up, great, love to hear it. But my bet is you don't, because I don't think it exists straight up. So, for safety and security reasons, we need to have strong borders and strong security around our country, which, by the way, exists in every country around the world. If you think the United States is unique in wanting to enforce immigration policy and controlling who is and is not in their country, try going to another country without papers and see what happens. Try going to any country in Europe, any country in Africa, any country in South America, and just don't bring a passport. See if they let you in. See how it goes for you. This is not a topic that's germane to the United States, and we need to apply some logic and common sense to this conversation if it's going to be meaningful. So I don't think that's controversial. If it is controversial, I don't understand why. I need someone to explain to me why that's controversial. These things seem very straightforward and common sense to me. We're like any other country that's got to protect its citizens, make sure it's that economically we can survive going forward. So now the question becomes, how do we deal with the current state of immigration and people that are already in the country that are not legally in the country? To me, I think there's different levels and different buckets. When you look at polls, and these are polls from non-partisan groups, like I'm not going to pay attention to a Fox News poll any more than I'm going to pay attention to a CNN poll. And there are other organizations out there that do polling that are partisan, that stack the polling to try to deliver the answer that they want. But when you look at polls that attempt to be disinterested and gauge the public's perception of issues, the majority of the country, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of race, regardless of age, support deporting people who are not in the country legally. Totally got it, and that's, you can count me in that camp. I'm in that camp 100%. I think the way in which we do that matters a lot. And I think the priorities on which we do that matter a lot too. I think, at least when the Trump administration took over, the promise and the initial focus was on people who had committed really, really aggressive or bad crimes in addition to the crime of coming into the country illegally. And I don't know, maybe that's a good place to start, is make no mistake about it, coming into the country without the proper documentation is a crime. It is not a civil offense. And so you need to stop listening to people who say it's a civil offense, not a criminal offense, because that's bullshit. If you come into the country on a visa or some other legitimate way of entering the country with approval, with proper documentation, and you overstay that paperwork, whether it's a visa, whether it's an H-1B, whether it's a green card, whatever it is, overstaying that becomes a civil offense. That is true. But when you enter the country without the proper paperwork, it's a crime. It's criminal, just like speeding is a crime. It's not a huge crime, but it's a crime. And so we need to stop this bullshit of, oh, it's not a crime. Yes, it's a crime. So let's just put that to bed. That's just straightforward. With that said, do we need to spend a bunch of time chasing around people who aren't committing crimes while they're in the country? No, I don't think we start with those people. Absolutely not. We want to go after people that are trafficking drugs, trafficking people, committing aggressive crimes like rape, like assault, like armed robbery, like domestic abuse. If you are going to come into anyone's country, you have an obligation. You are a guest. And by the way, this is the same way I think about going to other countries. Last year, my wife and I went to Mexico, and I did not expect anyone in Mexico to speak English because I was there. I didn't expect anyone in Mexico to change their laws or give me special treatment because I was there. It was my responsibility to behave like an appropriate guest in the country of Mexico while I was in the country of Mexico. It's not racist to say you should conform to the society in which you're interacting with. That's not a racist thing to say. We like to say it's racist because there's a different skin tone to some of the people that come in, largely because they're the neighbor closest to us from the South. And it's not a racist thing to say immigrants should assimilate to the culture in which they're moving. And it doesn't matter. If you're going to move to Poland, you should assimilate to Polish culture, regardless of where you're moving from. If you move to Uzbekistan, you should assimilate to Uzbekistan culture. If you move to the United States, you should assimilate to the United States culture. That doesn't mean you have to give up all of your heritage and pretend you've never come from another place, or if you celebrate a specific holiday or religion or observances, by all means, do those things. But you don't have the right to ask the society to conform to the way you want that society to be. It's not how it works. You are the guest. You need to assimilate. That seems very straightforward to me as well. So, the people who are in the country illegally and have committed or are committing other aggressive crimes, I think we need to aggressively go after those people, apprehend them, and deport them as quick as possible. So I think that's pretty straightforward. On that note, though, I think this is important because there's a lot of talk right now about apprehending people or detaining people without judicial warrants. And the way that is phrased is intentional. So, is it true that a lot of detainees or a lot of immigrants who are being detained without a judicial warrant? 100% that's accurate. 100% that's true. Is that a new thing? No, absolutely not. It's been around for centuries. In fact, there was a Supreme Court case in 1959 that upheld the constitutionality of detaining people that are in the country illegally on administrative warrants instead of judicial warrants. One thing that's important to note about those administrative warrants is that an administrative warrant can only be issued after due process has been had. So there has been some type of hearing, some type of adjudication, some type of appearance and ruling in front of a court of law that says, yes, this person is in fact in the country illegally. We do not recognize their claims for asylum or whatever other argument they're making to stay in the country. And so that administrative warrant is issued by what's now, I think, ICE. It used to be INS. You know, I'm a dinosaur. So back in the day, when I was growing up, it was INS, but it morphed into ICE. I think, if I remember right, when this isn't 100% accurate, so don't quote me on this, but I think when Homeland Security became a department, INS converted to ICE and folded into that. But that process has been in place for centuries or decades. And the administrative warrant is only issued after due process has been had. So when you hear someone say, "Where's your judicial warrant?" It's a red herring. It's completely unrealistic to think that we could get a judicial warrant issued for the millions, if not tens of millions of people that are in the country illegally. That doesn't mean they don't deserve due process. They deserve due process. But once due process has happened and there is a deportation order issued against them, you don't need a judicial warrant from that point. It's only an administrative warrant. And that is why that exists, is because we don't want to clog up the courts with millions of cases around immigration when there are plenty of other crimes that are definitely more serious in nature than entering the country illegally. It doesn't mean it's not serious to enter the country illegally, but do we want to postpone murder trials to have trials on immigration? Of course we don't. Do we want to postpone rape trials or assault trials or theft trials? Like those things are important. We don't want to clog up the courts. So this administrative warrant process was put in place so that after due process was had, you could issue an administrative warrant, you could detain the person in the country illegally and process them for deportation. So don't fall for this judicial warrant bullshit that's going on now. It's a red herring, it's wordplay, it's gamesmanship, and it's bullshit. It just is straight up bullshit. So don't listen to it. With that said, I don't think we need to spend a whole bunch of time and resources on people chasing down people in the community that are not committing crimes. But what I will say is that what you're seeing, like in cities like Minneapolis and like Portland, Oregon, where I'm from, by the way, I was born and raised in Portland, and I always say Portland's a good place to be from because it means you're not there now. Like, it's Portland's a very different city than the one that I grew up in. It's kind of gone communist, and they've kind of lost their minds out there. My friends and neighbors got to get their shit in one saw because they're wrecking that city, man. They're wrecking that city. But what you see is local officials that are refusing to collaborate with federal officials. And that is just wrong. Like, it's just wrong to say we understand what the laws of the nation are, and we're not going to collaborate with you to enforce those laws of our nation. It's just not right. Now, does that mean that we should have municipal police departments out looking for illegal immigrants? No, it does not. Because that responsibility, as enumerated in the Constitution, is the responsibility of the federal government. It is the federal government's responsibility to defend and enforce border security. So we don't want municipal departments participating in the apprehension of people on the basis of their immigration status. So that's not a road. I don't think that's a road we want to go down. There's plenty of other things for those municipal law enforcement officers to be working on. But when they do apprehend someone that has stolen a car or broken into a business or assaulted someone physically or sexually or committed murder, and we know that they are an illegal immigrant, at that point, they should be notifying federal law enforcement that says, hey, we picked this person up for stealing this car. And in addition to grand theft, they're in the country illegally. They're going to bond out. And before we release them back into society to commit more crimes, you should come and apprehend them and start their deportation process, because that's where they're at in the process. Cities that claim sanctuary status have largely refused that collaboration. And I think that's a terrible, terrible mistake for a variety of reasons. The first one is just the safety of the people in those cities. So ask yourself that question. Are you happy that your elected officials have said, we're going to release someone who we just arrested for an aggressive physical crime, stealing cars, breaking into places, assaulting, all the things that I've left before, when there's a very valid reason for them to stay detained under federal custody because they're in the country illegally? You're okay with that. You're okay with releasing those people back so that when your wife goes up to the store at night, or your kids walk home from school, or your mother or father, your elderly mother or father comes home from church, you're okay with these people being back out in society, even though we know they've already decided that they don't care about our laws. You're okay with that because that's what you're endorsing if you endorse the sanctuary city policies. I think that's just wrong. Second, it's the law. Like, if we're not going to be a nation of laws, if we're not going to follow the laws that are on the books, or we're going to pick and choose which laws we follow on the books, like, what are we doing? Like, what's the point of having any laws if we just choose which ones we keep and which ones we ignore? Why should I not be able to say, I don't agree with income tax, and so I'm just not going to pay my income tax? I know it's a federal law, but like, I don't agree with it. And I'm a patriot. And I care about people. I care about my people. And so I want to keep that money and spend it on my people. So I'm just not going to pay my federal income tax. Would that be okay? Which laws are the ones that we can ignore, and which laws are the ones that we can follow? You tell me. You're the ones that are proposing that it's okay to ignore these laws. I want to know what the threshold is. Which laws are okay to follow and which laws are okay to ignore? So just on general principle, if we're going to have laws on the books, we need to enforce them. I'm fine changing the laws. Zero issue with us changing the laws. There are multiple ways built into both our federal and our state constitutions by which we can change those laws. The first and easiest one is for the duly elected representatives in our democratic republic who we elect to represent our voice in Congress, in the Senate, in the state houses, in the state senates. Those are the people that can effect changes to the law immediately. But we need to hold their feet to the fire. We need to quit looking at the president, whether it's Clinton or Bush or Obama or Trump or Biden, doesn't matter. That's not the president's job. The executive branch is there to enforce the laws as they exist. That's what the executive branch does. They don't make law. Can they make presidential declarations? Yes, absolutely. But they're very limited in their power. Executive order. I'm sorry. Executive order is the term I was looking for, and I couldn't grab it. But do they have the right to make executive orders? Yes, they do. But they're very limited in the power in those executive orders. And that's not the way the system is set up. Again, enumerated in the Constitution, both the state constitutions of each state, because they were largely modeled after the federal Constitution, and the U.S. Constitution. Lawmaking power is enumerated to the legislative branch, like it's literally in the name. They legislate, they make the laws. There's 535 people, 100 senators, and 435 representatives whose responsibility it is to make these laws. So you remember that the next time you hear someone railing about this isn't right, this isn't right. You're literally one of the 535 people who can make a change to this. You just won't do it. You're not doing your job. We need you to do your job. If we want to change these laws, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But while the laws exist the way that they are, we need to enforce the laws the way that they are. I think that's pretty straightforward. And you don't have the right. There's a clause in the United States Constitution called the Supremacy Clause that says if there's ever a conflict between state law, local law, and federal law has supremacy. It is the law of the land. And so if you don't like the federal law, totally got it. You can redress. It's in the First Amendment. You have the right to redress, to approach the government for redress. You can try to get it on a ballot. You can talk to your senators and your congressmen and try to get them to change those laws. There's mechanisms in place by which we can get those laws changed. I'm fine doing that, but we need to follow that. We can't just decide when we do and when we don't do that. So that's not the process that we're following right now. And now, with all that said, a lot of the actions we're seeing right now from the federal government are performative. I would argue many of them are unconstitutional and should not be happening. This is not the solution, the one that they've come up with, to flood cities with thousands of agents and walk the streets and stop people ad hoc and ask them to prove that they're U.S. citizens. That's not the approach. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. I don't think it's constitutional in many instances. It's not right. You can just look at it and see that it's wrong. So I'm not advocating at all for what we're seeing going on now. But it's important to understand that one of the major reasons why you're seeing that terrible judgment and terrible overreaction in these specific cities is because those local and state leaders have chosen not to collaborate with federal law enforcement. Doesn't excuse the behavior, doesn't make the behavior right, doesn't make it better, but it is one of the primary reasons, if we want it to go away, getting state and local leaders to collaborate with and follow federal law is one of the major solutions for that. So I think that's very important to understand. So along those same lines, we need to have some method by which we filter people that are in the country illegally and see how important it is to find them. Again, if we start with the people, and this was what was talked about. This is what Trump talked about a lot during his campaign. By the way, I've never been a registered Democrat or a registered Republican. I've always been independent. I so fundamentally disagree with several of the things in both parties' platforms that I've never been able to say, yes, I'm this or I'm that, because I so fundamentally disagree with several of the things in each party that I've never been one. So I'm not saying I'm nonpartisan because nobody is nonpartisan, but I am not beholden to either party. I try to look at things through common sense, through facts, and through logic and draw good conclusions and make good decisions from those conclusions by what those facts and the evidence tells me. So you can agree with me, you can disagree with me. I'd love to hear from you what you think or how you feel about things on this subject, because until we, and I say we, so this is all of us in the center. And I think you've got two fringe groups. You've got the groups that are the open border that we already talked about. The other fringe group are the crazy people who, there were two people that were killed in Minneapolis. That's tragic that two people died. There's lots of extenuating circumstances. Totally got it. With that said, there's two people that are no longer drawing breath on the earth because of this issue. And to hear people so coldly and callously say they got what was coming to them, they got what they deserved. What is the matter with you? Like, seriously, what is the matter with you? How do you make that statement? I understand saying, hey, there's extenuating circumstances. I feel terrible that they lost their life. There was some responsibility that they had for the situation they found themselves in. I totally understand that. But to be so cold and callous as to say they got what was coming to them, or to be indifferent about these people losing their lives, I mean, we got to be better than that. We just got to be better than that. So if you're in either one of those fringe groups, you're not the people I'm talking about right now. It's everybody else that's in the middle that sees all of the shades of gray to this particular subject. Until we take the conversation back over and we take the governance of these things back over, we're going to keep seeing a lot of the things that we're seeing. And I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in seeing more people die. I'm not interested in seeing more people come into the country illegally. I'm not interested in seeing state and local politicians flout the law because they're in positions of power. I'm not interested in seeing the federal government send a massive amount of agents into a place and act like a military force. And in a lot of instances, I think they're doing that. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. More than one thing can be true at the same time. You don't have to agree with every single side of a point simply because you tend to lean towards that side. I think it's important to be objective, and it's important to call things what they are and tell the truth. We should not have tens of millions of people in the country illegally, and it's terrible for our economy in a variety of ways. It absolutely puts a tax on housing. It absolutely puts a tax on the healthcare system. It absolutely puts a tax on the school system. And those are places where we need those resources for American citizens and American people. I care about people from Mexico, but that's what Mexico is responsible for. I care about people from wherever. Name, insert country here: China, Uzbekistan, Bangladesh. Doesn't matter to me. I care about people. I want people to have a good life. I want them to be happy. I want them to pursue the things that are important to them. But we don't have a responsibility to fund those activities simply because you can walk to our country. It's not an acceptable method by which we should manage immigration. It's just not acceptable. And by the way, like we talked about earlier, every country has that same policy. You can't walk from Austria to Germany. You have to have papers. You have to prove that you have a right to go from Austria to Germany. The German government has allowed you to do that. You can't walk from wherever, Spain to France. Like, they have border laws as well, and we should have those too. But we need to stop listening to these fringe groups. These fringe groups are not in a good state of mind, and we should not be listening to them when we make policy, when we figure out how to move forward for the situation that we're in. So Again, guys, we're live. So if you've got comments, you got questions, you want to add to something, my producer can get your comments to me so we can cover those while we're here on the live stream. So feel free to drop those into the comments. But this whole immigration issue, in addition to the things we talked about, right? We already have housing problems, especially in densely populated cities with really restrictive zoning laws. There's a tax on the medical system. We can do another live stream entirely on the medical system and how fucked up that thing is. But that's not the point of tonight. Tonight we're talking specifically about immigration. But along those lines, a lot of people love to say, well, illegal immigrants don't have access to the healthcare system. They're not being paid for by taxpayers. That's just false. That's just false. The workaround there is they go through the state Medicare and Medicaid plans, which are funded by the federal government. So when someone that doesn't have insurance that's in the country illegally goes to the emergency room because they're sick, like totally got it. I don't want people to suffer. I'm not saying don't serve them. I'm saying if we didn't have nearly as many in the country, then that bill would go down. But when they go to an emergency room with whatever, a broken arm, the flu, they get in a car accident, whatever, and they need medical treatment. They need treatment. We're not going to just, sit in the parking lot and die. That's not the approach. Like, that's not human. That's not a great way to approach things. But make no mistake about it, taxpayers are footing that bill. Taxpayers are footing that bill. So when you hear people say they don't get federal aid, they're saying that on purpose because it flows through the states, which are funded through federal funds. And so it's just false. And you don't have to take my word for it. All you have to do is Google what I just said. Do states get federal funding to care for illegal immigrants? Google it. You don't have to take my word for it. You should never take anyone's word for stuff. You should do your own research and understand subjects fully before you sign on to a particular point of view. So, but with that said, we need a logical and efficient way of handling these issues. And the deportations that are happening now, again, I think the federal government has fucked this up. They've done it for show. They've tried to what they thought was impress their base, and they've overstepped their bounds. It looks authoritarian. It looks terrible. The optics are terrible. I think it's a terrible way to treat people. I'm not for that at all. However, I am for enforcing our laws. And there's a way to do that, which Obama did, which Bush did, which Clinton did. I haven't seen enough data on Biden, so I don't know how good or bad they did. But the data that I have seen shows that the ones I just mentioned, Clinton, Bush, Obama, all deported tens of millions of people in the country illegally during their presidencies. We never heard a word about it because they did it in a way that made sense and it was methodical. Now, has there been, I've read, and I wasn't able to verify this, but I'll bring it up anyways with the caveat that I have not fact checked this, but the immigration into the United States over the last 10 years has rivaled the immigration that happened in the Industrial Revolution at Ellis Island, when the country was flooded with immigrants who wanted to come to America to build a better life for themselves and their families. So the sheer number of people who have come to the country illegally in the last 10 years may have changed the landscape and made it more difficult to handle these things in the way that they used to be handled. I'm sorry. But that doesn't change the fact that what's going on now is bullshit. We cannot do what we're doing. The flip side to that, and there's always a flip side. So this is what I'm talking about when I say we need to look at all things. The solution to that, and one of the main causes of that, is people interfering with law enforcement operations. So let's just get a couple things clear real quick. There is no right to protest in the U.S. Constitution. It does not exist. You can look it up, put it into a PDF document, hit Control F, and search for the words right to protest. It won't come up because it's not in there. What is in there in the First Amendment is the right to peaceably assemble, the right to redress your government with grievances, and the right to free speech. So if you combine all of those, you can infer that there is a right to protest that is protected. But there has been case law after case law after case law that's been decided by the Supreme Court over centuries that there is a right to maintain public safety and the operation of society, that you can control how and when those protests happen. You can't just have a parade this weekend because you want to have a parade. You have to get a permit. You have to provide a security plan. And I've done this because I'm a business owner. And so we've done some stuff to try to promote businesses. Those are things that we have in place so that we can keep our society operating. You don't get to block traffic. That's not a protest, it's a crime. You don't get to put your hands on law enforcement officers or stand in front of them when they're in the middle of a law enforcement operation. Those are crimes. And if we're not going to enforce those crimes, why are they crimes? Like, why do we even have them on the books if we're just going to allow people to do it? And the reality is, look, I don't know if any of you guys that are listening have kids. I have 3 kids. And when my kids were young, they would throw tantrums like any kid does that throws a tantrum. The worst thing you can do when a kid throws a tantrum is fucking give in to them and reward the tantrum. So, like, I don't understand why we're not arresting and prosecuting these people to make this stop. But who does that? That's actually not the federal government's responsibility. It's not the federal government's responsibility to control crowds. It's not the federal government's responsibility to control traffic. It's not the federal government's responsibility to control protests. That's state and local. And again, in these sanctuary cities, they're abdicating or flat out refusing to accept their responsibility to enforce these laws. So you get chaos. And the chaos is feeding into these terrible decisions that we're seeing being made by the federal government. So this is one of those instances where nobody's right. Like, everybody has fucked this up 7 ways to Sunday. And we, the rational, logical, normal people in the middle, have to come together, and we've got to just stop these people, these crazy people on either side, from doing what they're doing. We have to demand that we go back to a society of law and order, a society of laws, and we need to treat people with humanity while we do it. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And look, I've been in my fair share of scraps. Like, I've been in my fair share of fights. I've won some and I've lost some. That's how you get tough. You get tough by losing fights, not winning them. And I've lost my fair share, so I'm pretty tough. But I'm not, like, I don't have a problem with physical altercations. I've been in them in my life. What we're seeing now is just people throwing tantrums. And we've got to get people out of this kind of trance that they're in, blindly supporting one side or the other, and have a rational discourse somewhere in the middle and figure out how we're going to handle this. It's interesting to me because I was fortunate that in the 2000s, late 2000s, after Bush left office, just real quick, wanted to say hello to everybody. My producer said we're seeing a pretty good audience and appreciate everyone tuning in. Love to have your comments. Love to hear what you think about this. You can listen to me rant and rave all you want, but I'd love to hear your take or your opinions on some of these things, because if you're listening to this, you're probably a rational left brain typed person and would love to read your comments, to respond to your comments. Would love to hear from you. So, but getting back to what I was saying, I was fortunate to hear President Bush W., the son, not the father, speak at a fundraiser. And it was very interesting because 2 things struck me. One, he talked about the Iraq War, and he teared up when he talked about the Iraq War. He was not faking what he did. Obviously, that was very controversial, and we wound up in that war under false pretenses, and a lot of people, both Americans and non-Americans, paid the ultimate price for that. And he acknowledged that. He said, I have a bond with the people that I sent to war because it was my decision. You can agree with it, you cannot agree with it, but I have a responsibility and a bond to those people, and we're going to be connected until we're no longer on this earth. And I found that compelling when he talked about it. The second thing he said, someone said, with the big caveat, other than Iraq, what was your biggest regret during your 8 years as president? And he did not hesitate. He said, I really wish I could have got something done on immigration. And if you think about that, he talked about it. He said, I'm from Midland. Texas. And so I live close to the Mexican border, Mexican United States border. And I drive through there a lot. And it gets pretty hot down there. And I see people putting roofs on houses. I see people working fields. I see people building roads and fences. And I can guarantee you that most of those people are not Americans. He said there's a lot of people who just want to come to our country and want to assimilate, want to become US citizens, and are willing to do the work and be good citizens of the United States. I wish I could have got something done that allowed us to give them a path to participate in our society. And that made a lot of sense to me. And he stopped short of saying giving them citizenship because, again, I'm not a fan of naturalizing people who broke the law to come here. That's just me. I think if you reward bad behavior, it encourages future bad behavior. By the way, we tried that once. Reagan naturalized, I think it was 3 million people back in the 80s. We there's been tens of millions more that have come to our country illegally. So we tried that once and that didn't work. In fact, it's gotten much more serious since we did that. So I don't think that's the solution. Again, I look at past results as a predictor of future behavior because I think it's the best evidence that we have for that. But if you're in the country illegally, could you not get permanent residency so that you could get a job above the table and you could get a job that allowed you to pay FICA tax? Look, I'm a business owner, and I can tell you, for those that haven't owned a business, businesses pay a tremendous amount of taxes. My wife and I have literally paid millions and millions of dollars in taxes over the course of our life. And I've been with my wife for 32 years. So millions and millions of dollars between property taxes and payroll taxes and gas taxes and blah, 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 blah. We've paid millions of dollars in taxes. So I feel very comfortable expressing my opinion on how taxes are spent because I've paid a lot of them. With that said, as an employer, you know that FICA that comes out of your payroll, the employer pays the same amount at the same time you do. The government gets half from you. The other half comes from the employer. The Medicare tax, all the payroll taxes that local municipalities have, all of those are not collected when someone works for cash under the table. And we put a lot of people who want to be in the United States, who want to work, who want to participate in society in a position where they're not contributing into that tax revenue bucket. And if we could close that loop, man, think about how much more tax we could create. The other issue on that is the transfers that leave the United States and go back to people's home countries. It's billions of dollars a year that are siphoned out of our economy and sent back home. And look, let's just be real. If it were you, if it were me, I won't speak for you, but I'll speak for me. If I was in another country and I was working, I would absolutely send money back home to support my family. There's not a chance in hell I wouldn't do that. So I'm not blaming people for doing that. But what if we stopped that from happening? It would make the proposition of coming to the United States much less attractive if you could not take the revenue that you generate or the income that you generate in the country and send it back to the country in which your family lives. Like that's another option to kind of make the border more secure and make it less attractive for people to break the laws that we have on the books. But like we need to close the tax loophole there because families come, their children are in schools which are funded by taxpayers. Their children get covered under Medicare and Medicaid at the state level, which is funded by taxpayers. I run grocery stores, and I can assure you that there are people in the country illegally getting SNAP benefits. I can tell you that for a fact. I don't have to guess. I don't have to cross my fingers and hope I'm right. I see it. I know that that happens. I don't know to what scale, but I know it happens because I see it every day. And they're not contributing to the tax revenue bucket because they can't. And like W said, President Bush W, wouldn't we be better off finding some way for them not to get residency so that they could vote and that they had the same rights as American citizens and the thousands or millions of people who do the right thing and go through the right process to become American citizens over a long period of time. But shouldn't we give them some way to contribute to society if they're going to be here and they're going to work here? And I agree with that. I agree that most of the immigrants that are here are not bad people. I don't think they're criminals. I think some are, but hell, some Americans are criminals, right? We talked about that at the top of the live stream. There's plenty of shitbags that are American citizens, and we can't we can't kick them out. We got to lock them up and rehabilitate them. That's another subject. We could talk about the incarceration process and what's supposed to be a rehabilitative correctional system that is anything but. It's a for-profit system, and on a per capita basis, we kind of lead the world in locking people up for what I consider not good reasons. But again, those are the laws on the books, so we should look at those and change the laws. That's what we elect congressmen and senators to do, and we should hold them to account to do those things. So, with all of that said, I think to me, the biggest issue here is the polarity. We have to take the temperature down on this conversation. We have to stop giving a platform to people that are radically charged either way. It's not good to be totally open borders, and it's not good to be totally the federal government's always right and get all these bastards out of our country. Both of those, I think, are the wrong approach. I think most of us in the middle see the nuance that exists there. And I think most of us want to have a conversation about a rational, methodical, and intelligent solution to the challenge we find ourselves in. So, I guess those are my thoughts on this whole immigration issue that we're facing. So, we're up. We got almost 350 people on the live stream now, which is great. Appreciate you guys joining and listening to me talk about this particular subject. Again, love to hear your comments. Would love to hear from you what you think about this. This is not a problem that one person or one group is going to solve. It's going to be collectively. I think we have to figure out the direction we want to go as a country and then demand that the people that we put in office to enact these laws and to solve these problems actually do their jobs and solve these problems. It's to me, it's very similar to this whole alleged fraud that we see in daycares and senior centers and those types of places in multiple communities, by the way. So the Minneapolis one got a lot of play because Nick Shirley did a video, which certainly suggested that things were not on the up and up and warranted further investigation. No question about that. But I don't know about you, but I'm really, really tired of politicians grandstanding and pontificating and making statements about things and releasing things on Twitter. And did you see my Facebook post? Did you see me ask that guy hard questions in the Congress, in the committee? Great. You're one of the 535 people that can fix this shit. Why are we not holding people accountable? That's what your job is. Your job is to make sure that the judiciary is prosecuting people who break our laws. And I for one, am very tired of listening to politicians bloviate about these topics and not take action. I don't care about the hearings. I don't care about someone dunking on someone on social media. I want action. I want results. I want people that commit crimes and steal taxpayer money to be held accountable. And to me, the healthcare and the childcare are the tip of the iceberg. I think if you dug into it and kind of traced all the shell organizations, I think there's way more fraud in Medicare, Medicaid, and the military budgets than there are in here. Look, don't get me wrong, this is not small, and we should follow through on these things. However, I think there's way more money to be found. And it's one of the reasons why you saw so much pushback against Doge. Like, I think Doge, and like, again, another topic, but the concept behind Doge was good. The execution behind Doge, probably not great. And it was met with a lot of resistance because we're getting too close to the truth. If we actually got to the truth of how much money gets subverted through this intertwined web of uh, NGOs, non-government organizations, not-for-profits, not profits, and how that money flowed through our government and made it to activists, organizations across the spectrum. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. This is a government issue. And I don't think we've even scratched the surface in terms of the fraud and abuse in the government by these investigations that are going on up in Minnesota. But I will say that kind of takes us back, at least makes me think. Why do you think that there are so many people in the government in Minnesota that are actively involved in these protests? And I use the air quotes around protests because let's call them what they are. They're a resistance, they're a riot. Why are there so many people in the government involved in that? I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that these videos came out that showed really, really sketchy businesses that billed for hundreds of children a day for daycare, yet had no children there when someone showed up. You couldn't even get an application to submit for your child to be considered. There was so much terrible reporting and a rush to defend, to discredit Nick Shirley. And I don't know Nick Shirley at all. He's a 22, 23-year-old kid. So I think, he walked around with the camera and asked some questions and got pretty good footage. But I can tell you that nobody at 22 or 23 has much of anything figured out. Sorry if you're 22 or 23 and you're listening, but I was an idiot when I was 22 years old. I'm not much smarter now. I just know I'm not much smarter. I think that's the difference is I know how stupid I am now. I didn't know how stupid I was when I was 22. Now I know exactly how stupid I am. But there was a rush to discredit him and kind of subvert any attention to this issue. And to me, that's exactly why you see this has nothing to do with protecting our neighbors or feeling bad about immigrants or being a good human being. This is self-preservation. That's why you see it in Minneapolis. And ask yourself, why don't you see this happening in Charlotte, North Carolina? Why don't you see it happening in Albany, New York? Why don't you see it happening in wherever? Insert Huntsville, Alabama. 25% of the apprehensions for deportation since Trump has taken office happened in Texas. And that's been done with much less presence by ICE and DHS than there is in Minneapolis. And it's because there's collaboration between law enforcement in Texas and the federal government. It's not an accident that you're seeing all this. It's not an accident that it's lasting for weeks. It's not an accident that they continue to bring it up and continue to try to get you to focus. This is what a magician does so he can do his trick, right? He gets you to look at this hand, excuse me, over here, while he's over here opening the door so the lady that he sawed in half can get out. And he's got the wiggly legs in the box after he saws her in half. That's all it is. It's just a misdirection. And if you can't do the math, I think you're kidding yourself. If you can't tell that that's why the government and government officials are involved in this rioting and protesting and et cetera, et cetera. I just don't think you're being very honest with yourself. I think you've got to look at it for what it is. It's self-preservation, just like any of us. If we wind up in a hot spot, we want to get out of the spotlight, right? That's the first thing we do is, man, can I get out of the spotlight? And I think at best, the local and state politicians of Minnesota turned a blind eye when these issues were brought up to them. I have no idea if they were complicit or not, but we should find out. And they don't want you to find out. They don't want investigations. And if they can keep this whole immigration issue alive and make it the focus and center of attention, they don't have to answer for the fraud, the alleged. I've heard various numbers. So I've heard it alleged between 8 billion. I've heard numbers as big as 60 billion, none of which I've seen substantiated. So I'm not sure what to think about it. I know it's big. I know it's probably in the billions. I don't know how far into the billions, but there's no doubt in my mind that there's a tremendous amount of fraud happening in that system. And it's not just in Minnesota, by the way. I live in Ohio, and the same thing appears to have happened here down in Columbus, in our state capital. And so I've heard Washington has similar situations. Hell, I heard up in Maine there was some of this going on up in Maine, and I lived in New Hampshire for 15 years. So if you know anything about Maine, Maine just kind of hangs out up there in the northeast corner of the country and sticks to themselves. You know, they call anybody that's not from Maine flatlanders as you make your way up into the hills of Maine. And by the way, if you ever hear anyone say they got a camp in Maine, that doesn't mean a thing. That could be a goddamn Unabomber shack out in the woods. So it could also be the Bush compound in Kennebunkport. They all call them camps. I got a camp. I got a camp. So point being, this is widespread. It's across the country. You're seeing these actions in places like Minnesota and Portland because they don't want you to focus on what they're actually doing. This is what was the word I used before? Distraction. We'll just call it a distraction. They don't want you to pay attention to what they're doing, so they have you look at something shiny over here while they work their magic trick. So yeah, I think it's important for those of us in the middle to keep our wits about us, to filter through the emotional parts of these and get to the facts, get to the real world solutions. And by the way, we should, when we talk about real world solutions, we should be looking at things that have not been tried in the past and not worked. Meaning, we've tried, like we talked about amnesty, right? There was 3 million people. Look it up. Just Google Ronald Reagan amnesty, and you'll see that he gave amnesty to, I think it was about 3 million immigrants in the mid 80s. I think it was 85, 86. By the way, right around Iran-Contra. Well, so like Reagan was trying to distract from, oh, don't pay any attention to this fucking illegal gun trade I've been doing over here to support the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. Don't pay any attention to that. Look at what I did on immigration. So it's a pretty tried and true playbook in the political world. But if we've tried it before and it hasn't worked, why would we try it again and expect it to work? Much like socialism, right? I heard someone talking about this from a sports. I can put this in a sports perspective that I think will resonate with a lot of people. So there's a lot of football fans out there, and if you have a team that needs a quarterback, would you rather have a guy that has started 50 games and is 10-40 as a starter, or an untested college kid that's got a lot of potential? Almost everyone is going to pick the untested college kid that's got a lot of potential. But there's a small group of people who will say, well, but the guy that started 50 games has 50 games of experience. Yeah, but he's got a 20% winning percentage. Is that really the guy we want to entrust the team to run the offense? It's similar on governmental policy. If we've run policies before and they have not worked, there's a reason they have not worked. So unless we can point to very specific data, very specific circumstances, very specific changes or tweaks that we're going to make to that policy as to why it will work this time, we should not be going down roads that we've already traveled. We already went down that road. We already know it doesn't work, and we need to try something different. I think the way to try something different is for those of us who live in the real world, who raise families every day, who run businesses every day, whether you own the business or not. How many people are responsible for running a business that they don't own? There's lots of people that run businesses every day. They're the managers, they're the shift supervisors, they're the dispatchers, they're all of the people that have positions of responsibility to make sure things get done. We know how the real world works. You know when someone in your circle, you know if someone calls in sick, you know if that person's actually sick or they're just fucking hungover because they went out to the bar last night. You know, because you know that person, right? It's like we run grocery stores, and anytime, and I've worked in the grocery business for 30 years, and every grocery store that exists, someone is trying to steal from it. Sometimes that person is a customer, sometimes that person is an employee, but make no mistake about it, someone's trying to steal from it. And in most instances, the people that work in the store every day know who that person is. They know who's stealing. They just don't want to upset the apple cart and get in trouble or be unpopular, so they don't rat them out. They don't say anything about it, even though they know. It's like us. We know logically what will and won't work. Well, having agents flood a market or flood a city and walk up and down the street and ask people for ID, is that a good approach? Fuck no, it's not a good approach. We all know it's not a good approach. It's performative. It's smacks of authoritarianism. And I'm not a Trump's an authority. I don't have Trump derangement syndrome in any way, shape, or form. That guy cracks me up because he's literally like the bad breaker upper on Seinfeld. I don't know if you've ever seen the Seinfeld episode where Elaine dates a guy and finds out he's a bad breaker upper. And he says she breaks up with him and he says she's got a big head. And then she doesn't think, if that's all you got, big head. And then a bird flies into her head in the park and she winds up getting back where the guy is and has another interaction with the guy and stabs him with a fork. And then he meets George and George gives him the sob story of Susan dying from licking the envelopes. And he's like, tough luck, chinless. Trump is that guy that can just say things that set people off. And it's like giving in to the guy on the playground. It's just wild to me how people don't have perspective on it. And, you know, he was already in office 4 years. If he was going to take over the country, you think he would have done it, right? Like he had a chance once already. Plus, do you think he's capable of it? Do you think he's organized or disciplined enough to take over the whole country? Like, come on, man. Anyhow, the guy, it cracks me up. But I'm not a Trump derangement guy. But the current operation by the federal government looks bad. Like it looks authoritarian. It just does. Stopping people for no reason and demanding they identify themselves, that's not constitutional. That's not right. Flip side, like we talked about earlier, if we could just go into the jails and arrest keep detained the illegal immigrants who have committed terrible crimes, we wouldn't be out there chasing them in the goddamn neighborhoods, would we? They wouldn't be in your neighborhoods. I don't understand why you would want someone back in your neighborhood that steals cars or rapes women or breaks into businesses and steals things. Why are we protecting those people? I don't care where they're from. I don't want a U.S. citizen that does those things back out on the streets. It's got nothing to do with residency. In this particular instance, we've got a very valid way to deal with it. We know they've committed these crimes. That's why we arrested them in the first place. They're in apprehension. All you got to do is call ICE and say, hey, by the way, we picked this guy or gal up and they're in here illegally. We got to release them in 48 hours. Do you want to come arrest them when we do that? You bet. We'll be right there. Problem solved. Renee Good's probably still alive if we do that. Alex Preddy's probably still alive if we do that. More than one thing can be true at the same time. The government can have a violent overreaction, and the protesters can be off their rocker and creating many of the issues they claim to hate. Like more than one thing can be true at the same time. And we can't just continue to let people do these crazy things and get away with it. I was watching a clip the other day where there are, the resistance. I saw someone compare them to the French resistance, like whatever. French resistance was kind of funny because Germany took over France in about 3 fucking weeks in World War II. So what bunch of resistance when they just parade down Main Street and take over your country? But there was a resistance, and so I don't want to discount that. But the folks of Minneapolis, they've literally set up checkpoints and they're stopping people. Are you ICE? Identify yourself. Why are you coming to this neighborhood? How about none of your fucking business is why I'm coming to this neighborhood? You don't have any right to stop me and ask me those things any more than an ICE agent does. So it's very funny to me how people who claim to hate a behavior will replicate the behavior. It reminds me of the movie The Untouchables. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a great movie in the 80s, starred Sean Connery and Kevin Costner. It was about Elliot Ness apprehending Al Capone. There's a patina of truth to the story, but it's obviously they took a lot of poetic license when they told the story. But it's a great movie. And Sean Connery is the street smart Irish cop. Elliot Ness is the idealistic but naive federal agent who wants to crack down on bootlegging and get Al Capone. And Sean Connery's question is, what are you prepared to do? What are you prepared to do to get this guy? Because if you actually want to get him, you probably have to act like him, which means breaking laws, which means intimidating and threatening people, which means doing things that are unsavory and probably not super humane. But how bad do you want to get them? What are you willing to do? And that's the people in Minnesota like can't see that they're doing the same shit they're complaining about. Like it's a bunch of these doorknobs that are out in the middle of streets, like literally stopping people. Where are you coming from? They're running your license plate. Like, who are these people? Who the fuck do you think you are? You don't have any right to do these things any more than the ICE agents have a right to do these things. Like, what the hell is going on? So anyhow, yeah, I guess that's about it for tonight, guys. We've got to keep our wits about us. We've got to figure out how to have rational conversations. We got to stop yelling at each other. We got to stop calling each other names. We got to work together to solve the problems that we have in society. I thought this one was a good one to talk about because there's a lot of nuances to it. There's a lot of various viewpoints. And this is one where I don't think anyone's got it all right. I think there's plenty of problems on the arguments on each side. And I thought it was a good one for us to talk about while we're together tonight. So normally we have another guest. We have another person on the live stream on Thursdays at 6. We had a scheduling problem and our guest had to back out at the last minute, but I did not want to not do the live stream tonight. So I thought immigration was a good topic. But you can catch us every Thursday night at 6 p.m. doing the live stream. You can also go to our website, saltygingertalk.com. We do a podcast, 4 episodes a week, plus a live stream on Thursdays. You can subscribe to our podcast from the website. We have all of the episodes available on the website, also on our YouTube channel, which you're on. We do publish a newsletter every weekday you can subscribe to on our website if you're interested in that. Super helpful for us if you can subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube channel. We're seeing great growth. We're approaching 20,000 subscribers for a year and a half. We're pretty happy with where that's at. And we cover issues like this where we try to get people to remove their emotions, think logically, process things rationally, and make solid decisions both in their personal and professional lives, and to work with others to do the same so that we can move our country and our world forward. So that's something you're interested in. Make sure you subscribe. Appreciate you checking out on the live stream tonight. We'll be back next Thursday. We'll publish another episode tomorrow. Really appreciate you guys coming on, and we will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks so much.